A robot made of bones!
Zemapel Bonebot.
What's happening, friends? We're back discussing Futurama, the Hulu revival, season 11, up to episode 7, I believe. The much feared and dreaded COVID episode, Rage Against the Vaccine. So here we are. There are going to be spoilers ahead, so if you're not into those, please duck out now and check back later. So as I mentioned, this is the vaccine, the virus episode that a lot of people were kind of fearing and kind of a bit hesitant about, basically, because it was too topical, blah, blah, blah. So was it as bad or as loathsome as people were hoping or fearing, I guess I should say? Well, I have to say off the bat, yes and no. So there were some things in this episode that I actually thought they did fairly well, and there were other things in this episode that are just, I don't even want to say bad, they were just already way too dated right out of the box. And I feel like they probably tried to shove a lot of extra stuff in this episode to take the focus off of things. But before I go into all of those thoughts, brief rundown of what happened in this episode. It starts off, in essence, calling the end of the COVID-19 virus. It's officially been beaten, finally, in this future, and obviously that holds up to zero scrutiny whatsoever because it's never been referenced in the show before, but I guess it was just a nice joke about how long it's going to last. And then immediately there is a new virus that comes into play, this Rage virus, which is their stand-in. However, while the virus itself wasn't exactly all that interesting, the side effects of it, of all the characters getting a little rageful, was, I guess, a nice little added element to the show, and it was a nice little play on the people that actually were getting rageful during the time that happened in 2020. However, all of the little jokes and references about masking and the Q-tips and all sorts of things, way too on the nose. They were basically the actual stuff that happened. They weren't necessarily a stand-in. Now, the professor did have a slightly modified, updated technological version, but I think this is where the episode primarily fell down. They really missed the boat to do a fun, futuristic twist that really wasn't just a copy of actually things that happened in the real world just set 1,000 years in the future. That's the part where they missed the boat. Had they done something even like, the garbage episode way early on in Futurama, where they had to look backwards to our modern time and kind of take a look at what we did and then kind of build from there, maybe they could have done something similar. Obviously, the whole pandemic happened after Fry left. He wouldn't have any prior knowledge of that, so it would be kind of interesting for them to get this new virus going, and they have to kind of look back in the history books and discover all the crazy things that went on in the real world during the 2020 pandemic here, and that could have been a fun exploration or analysis of how wacky things were while still actually involving the things that happened in our time. Maybe they try to recreate them because their medical science had lost this entire era or something. Maybe there was a great purge of everybody trying to forget this because it was so weird in history. That was the missed opportunity. Those elements were probably the downfall of the episode. But like I said, they shoved so many other little things in here. There was the small side plot of Fry and Leela wanting to be together even though Leela was sick. They had the little kind of sort of allegory very early on about the mutants and the sewers being the cause of this, or at least being held to blame, held liable for being the cause of it. So that was kind of interesting, but they didn't really explore that enough to be anything. The Omicronians kind of being the false information people trying to infiltrate and conquer. I liked that little touch. Again, not played up very much in the episode. It was basically a side tangent, 100% in my opinion, in order to get in that little joke about the Omicron variant.
It's a highly contagious Omicron variant.
You're a contagious variant.
Which is kind of a full circle moment, because during the actual time in our history when the Omicron variant was coming out and nobody could determine how to pronounce it, everyone was saying Omicron or Omnicron or whatever. I always went back to Futurama's way of pronouncing Omicron as the way to pronounce it. So it's kind of a weird full circle moment to have that actually come into play and be referenced in part of this here. But I must say, the one saving grace of this episode, the one thing that did basically all the things I've been asking this new iteration of Futurama to do, had to have been the Hermes, I guess it was the co-A plot. I mean, I could say that the virus was the A plot and his was the B plot, but we spent so much time with his plot that I'm going to go ahead and say it's the co-A plot. The whole voodoo being the real solution here, that the virus was caused by some sort of zombieism and voodoo is the only way to cure that, and all of the fun Easter eggs and the little magical twists of voodoo connecting with science and the people denying science in favor of voodoo. All of that stuff was great. His little travels across the world here, going to New Orleans, all of the people and the public transportation and the new and interesting and even old reoccurring characters. It was great to see all that. That's one of the things I've been saying this new iteration of Futurama has been missing. It's felt like a vastly empty universe, a vastly empty world, and we got to see all this population of just new and old characters living lives, people going about in the background doing their own stuff, people on public transportation just existing and not really having much to do with the plot whatsoever. We got Bonebot, who was kind of a really cool new addition. He's a robot made out of bones. Although I guess the little relationship love triangle between La Barbara, Hermes, and Barbados Slim was kind of I'm a little over them overhyping and overplaying that one side of the character. But it worked for the storyline, so I can't really ding it too much. I just feel like if they didn't hype that up quite so much, it probably would have been a slightly more effective element to the episode. But overall, I think the Hermes part may be one of the strongest little storylines and character interactions and just developments overall that we've seen in this new iteration. I guess I keep saying this revival of Futurama. This is potentially the worst episode in some ways, but it has some of the best elements of the revival in other ways. And I have to imagine they kind of crammed those things together with all of these little subplots and all of these other storylines because they didn't really feel either confident or I don't know the way to put it, but they didn't feel like if they just made a pure 22-minute COVID episode that they could sustain it or that people would really resonate with it. And that leads me to wondering why they wanted to do it in the first place. It seems like these are all jokes or references or things that the writers probably thought of during the pandemic and just had nowhere else to throw them in. So they just put them in here, even though we're quite beyond that and it's already feeling dated. So it's definitely not going to be a fantastic time capsule unless things like this keep reoccurring every few years and it just becomes the norm, which, knock on wood and fingers crossed, doesn't actually come to play. All that being said, I guess I don't necessarily know how to rank this episode or think about it because on one hand, it's the worst. One hand, it's the best. Put it all together, I guess it's an average episode. But outside the Xmas episode last week, I feel like the fun Hermes bits here are probably the best stuff we've gotten in New Futurama, and it's actually beginning to feel like we're in the world of old Futurama. Leave all your thoughts below. What did you think of this episode? Did it fail to meet your expectations? Did you not even have expectations because of what this episode was supposed to be about? Tell me all about it in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, throw me some money, do all the fancy YouTube things. And until next time...
After all, any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from science.